Hey America, you're listening to the Minutemen podcast. I am your host, Rob, with the Dark Frenchman, Steve, and the Squid, and we're going to be sitting down with Governor Hopeful Noah Dyer tonight on the Minutemen. And you're listening to the Minutemen on 107.3 FM, Planet X Network. Alright everybody, welcome to a very special segment. So Noah, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, thanks for coming in. Thank you. So, let's get things started. So, let's just kick it off with something a little easy tonight. On a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being good, 1 being bad, 10 being, excellent. How's the campaign so far?
The campaign, I suppose, depends on what aspect you look at. In most respects, I'll say it's been going great. When I look at all of the ground we've covered, it's been spectacular. When I look at what's in front of us, that is still a little bit daunting. So, if the election were today, we wouldn't win.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we've got enough runway in front of us that over the next 7 months, winning is a real possibility. We keep on gaining voter share every day. So
yeah.
We just got to keep on keeping on.
Who would you say you get the most opposition from? Democrats or Republicans? Like when you go out and you talk to people, and you say, I'm an independent, I'm trying to get your vote for governor, and they say I'm a Democrat or Republican. Who basically do you have the most problems with?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. I would say that right now, Republican ideology is more strongly groupish, right? So, for example, I live in LD20, and I wanted to attend as a constituent, not as a speaker or anything else.
Mm.
And they wouldn't let me come in because I am not a Republican, even just to watch.
Mm.
And whereas Democrats will let anybody into their meeting as long as you're not making a ruckus and whatever else. And I'm not actually saying that that's good or bad. It's just a truth to the Republican ideology that they don't feel bad excluding you if you're not part of their clan.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the street, Republican registered voters are more inclined to just give me without even listening to what I have to say, just say, I'm a Republican, I'm not interested. But I would also say, so I've answered your question, but I would also say that even amongst Republicans, that is a small percentage. Probably 1 in 10 Republicans that I meet does that, whereas like 1 in 50 Democrats does.
Do you think that that has to do with you being so open and transparency?
That honestly doesn't come up a lot anymore. It's been literally a year and a half,
mm-hmm.
and so it's not a central theme of the campaign, and it's not something that's on most voters' minds. Certainly, folks who experienced that early on, if I see someone that's...
Well, I don't know, because I have some friends who I talk to about, about it too. And, one of the most interesting things I hear coming up is this, like, he sleeps with married women. He broke up a marriage. I'm just like, you are a Trump voter, though, correct? And they're like, usually, yeah, but it's just like, then what's the big deal? You're putting your morality out there as a shield just so, you can justify not even listening to somebody.
Absolutely. Well, so I think there's a few different things going on there. Fundamentally, as far as election effectiveness, what we know is that very conservative voters can get past that if they think that the issues are right or the candidate is right.
I think if the candidate's strong is what they like, and I see that from you. you don't hold back.
Yeah.
I want to speak on that. I saw your recent campaign video. I thought it was really good. Is it recent? Sorry, I saw it just the other day. Yeah, it was great. The whole I'm listening.
Yes.
My favorite was that in your front room.
December is when we released it, but.
Was it? My bad.
Yeah,
I just seen it, so my bad.
Quite all right.
Was that filmed in your living room?
That was not filmed in my living room.
I was wondering about it.
I have a much more humble living room than that.
Yeah, I was just curious about that.
Yeah.
But that's what I hear the most though is about they put this like kind of more their morality up to shield themselves from even listening to somebody like you, which I think is a real shame because there's like you have a lot to offer. Especially someone who's conservative, in ideology. They need somebody like you. I think especially out here in Arizona because the policies are so drowned in like donor kind of conservatism. It's just kind of ridiculous. But let's move on a little bit. Doug Ducey just signed that big school budget bill, and everyone gave him some criticism. I want to hear what your criticism was of it.
Well, fundamentally, I would say that marketing it as a big school budget bill is hardly accurate. It maintains funding that otherwise would have been lost, making things even worse than they already are. We're still below pre-recession spending levels, and that's just compared to ourselves and compared to the nation. We are even lower than that, both in achievement and in funding. And while I don't think necessarily you can just throw money at problems, I think it's important to be where you spend your money shows what your priorities are. And here in Arizona, it's pretty clear that education has not been a priority for this governor or the governor before. And it is one of my biggest priorities. So I've got a plan to take us from 48th in the nation to 25th. And I think from there we can compete and start to climb, maybe not the funding, but the achievement levels.
What did you think of his opioid bill he passed? I wanted to hear that too.
Well, I get mixed. So, fundamentally, I think we didn't solve the problem with the biggest solutions to the problem, right? So, for example, cannabis is an incredible solution to the opioid problem. It wasn't discussed. People who are actually in pain, I'm fortunate enough not to have had opioids in decades, but so people who are experiencing that now have to go to the doctor, every 5 days or every 30 days, depending on their situation. It creates a lot more hassle for folks, for lots and lots of people who aren't abusing, in order to stop the few people who are. And people who are abusing opioids, they don't do it because of a desire to abuse opioids. They do it because other things are going on in their lives and other services. We'd probably get more bang for our buck helping them move forward and get some self-confidence and satisfaction in their existence, as opposed to simply saying, you got to go to the doctor every 5 days if you want to get this so that we can make sure you're not addicted.
I agree with that. One of the things I find most interesting, too, is, you are the only guy out there speaking on behalf of marijuana, not being a marijuana user yourself. I find that interesting. Why do you think your opponents don't like to speak so freely about, legalizing marijuana or pot or weed or the devil's lettuce?
Well, I think some of them may be concerned about what it means for their own use, or having to talk about their own usage. Not that had I used, I wouldn't be embarrassed to talk about it, but having literally never consumed cannabis or any other illegal drug in any form, I've got a lot of moral authority on which to speak on the issue. And certainly...
That's why you're on this side of the table with Steve.
Yeah, we got the same thing in common. I love it. So, again, what people want to do with their bodies, ultimately, within reason, they ought to be able to govern that. And whether that's what they do for pain, what they do for recreation, what they do for anything else. And we also know that cannabis is safer than alcohol, but alcohol is legal. So beyond that, beyond just personal freedom, cannabis is a huge solution to a lot of the problems we face. If we legalize cannabis recreationally, it'll generate $3 billion in revenue, which equates to 50,000 good-paying jobs. It will lessen the burden on our law enforcement, judicial system, our corrections system. It will create over $100 million in tax revenue. So it is all solution and no problem. And, you can go on Netflix and watch all kinds of documentaries about the history of why cannabis has been demonized in the first place. But fundamentally, if you're the kind of person that looks at reality, cannabis is a solution. In fact, cannabis was very American in the beginning. In fact, it used to be mandatory that farmers grew cannabis for hemp, actually, back in revolutionary times. Yeah. What do you think about... So, I want to talk a little bit, if you're comfortable, about Steve Farley a little bit. Everyone is pretty much, guaranteeing that he's going to probably be the front runner to go up against Doug Ducey. That's from what my understanding, from what I see. He seems to generate the most... Money, exactly. I want to hear what you think about him, because, my main problem with Steve Farley, and I've said this many times, it's not that he's a bad guy. It's just that he's such a cookie-cutter Democrat. Yeah. Such by the book. Such a moderate, I'm going to say what they tell me to say. I'm going to do what they pay me to say. He just seems he's the perfect opponent for Doug Ducey, in my opinion. And I mean that in a negative way. I don't mean that in a positive way. I mean that as there's no difference. From Doug Ducey's perspective. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Well, I'll say this. First off, I think that assessment is wrong. I understand you're not the one who came to your own conclusion, but the people who are talking that way, I think they're wrong. What Steve Farley had is a $200,000 fundraising lead over David Garcia. But when I am out shaking hands, and so that's, by the way, that's $500,000 versus 300,000. When I am out shaking hands, no one knows who Steve Farley is or expresses support for him. Like literally, maybe one person in all of the thousands of hands that I've shaken and asked for a signature has someone said, "No, I'm supporting Steve Farley," or "I'm supporting Steve Farley, but I'll sign for you anyway," or "Tell me why you're better than Steve Farley." Those are things that just, they never happened to me. Alternatively, a few people, still not a very high percentage of people, but a few people out there will say something like, "I'm supporting David Garcia," or "Tell me why you're better than David Garcia," or something like that. So David Garcia has some name recognition. And you might say, well, that's Maricopa County versus Pima County or whatever else. It's not true. I've campaigned down in Ajo. I've campaigned like in Tucson on U of A campus, places where Steve Farley, if he had brand recognition, it would be there. Nobody knows the guy. Nobody cares. And I don't think $200,000 is enough to overcome that. So my prediction is that David Garcia will be the nominee.
Interesting. The reason I even bring it up about Steve Farley probably being the nominee is just because in our circles, you know, he comes on a lot of progressive shows. Not that he is progressive, but he just kind of sticks his foot in the door on a lot of these talk shows, so everyone thinks, oh, you know, Steve Farley, he's probably a progressive guy, you know, he's probably for change. But I really don't see the difference between him and, you know, any other moderate Democrat, to be honest with you. That's just me, you know.
I think a moderate Democrat who could get people energized and win votes from the center, or, you know, from moderate Republicans, that would actually be exciting. I wouldn't fault the guy for that. You know, this is Arizona.
I guess I should say moderate Democrat. I should say more like corporate Democrat.
Sure.
I guess sorry for the wrong term. That's what I should say.
No, but I would pose the question saying, what's the difference in today's society? Like, how? Because Arizona is sort of an older state, other than the other states, right? So, if we're being, you know, politically correct here, you know, right? If you guys want to be correct about it, I should say. So, with that being said, a lot of people here have a lot of, you know, I hate to say it, but like backwards ideology.
Ideology.
Yeah, ideology. Yeah.
It's okay, buddy.
Thinking. So, with them thinking the way they do, they stick to the guns with Republicans, you know, as you just said, that they kind of have that like closed mind thinking, but so do the Democrats on that side, which is why you get the cookie cutters that come through. Where's the mold breaking? You know what I mean? Like, it's do you really believe that the moderates now, that, you know, the children now that are having bigger voices, as we've seen, do they care about the moderates anymore on either side? I mean, I think they're more awake to what's going on, and they're not falling for a Doug Ducey anymore, and now they're aware of what a Doug Ducey is, and they're not falling for his schemes, nor are they falling for like a Steve Farley. So where do you like break the mold for them? You know, they look at that and they're like, we don't care.
Right. Well, I mean, I think precisely what you're talking about is the election of Trump, right? Like, Trump broke the mold. Not that any of us here in the room are like all about that, at least on a. It's
all about MAGA, man. You know, Trump, man.
But fundamentally, that was somebody who came in with a distinct message. He decided to use the party machine to his advantage, plus social media, and reached out and touched a different group of people and got them to the polls or to vote in a different way than had been happening here. So that kind of thing, people out there want it. Arizona wanted Trump. You know, Arizona voted for Trump.
Maricopa voted overwhelmingly for Trump in the election. I think we were the most. We voted for him more than any other county in America. Maricopa, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't quite look up that deal.
Yep.
I mean, you know, statewide, you know, he won by 2%, which is not an incredible margin, but you know, it wasn't Hillary, right?
Yeah, right.
So Arizonans are interested in a different message, a message of breaking up, you know, the corporate establishment. And you would also find that, to my surprise, folks who voted for Trump are not they actually think he's delivering on that message of changing Washington. And I think Trump gets more grief than he deserves.
Interesting.
He has... Really? Absolutely. For example, on gun control, he's actually come out with some reasonable policies to advance gun control.
I hope you're not referring to teachers, army
No, that's
teachers.
not one.
Okay.
But he said he's talked about raising the age. He's talked
Yeah.
about banning bump stocks. He's talked about closing the background check loopholes.
We'll see.
Which
It's talk for now.
it's talk, but he said it right, and you don't hear people saying like, "Yes, let's get these things done that Trump is for." Instead, they say Trump is a hater, right? And similarly, on like with Dreamers, Trump came out and said, "Let's do actual citizenship for DACA students," right? After a 12-year period. Nobody gave Trump credit for that. They said, if you want a wall, then you're just a horrible person. And I understand the logic there, but what I'm saying is Trump has been so divisive that people who claim to be rational and reasonable and whatever else are not listening to what he's actually saying. He's probably the most independent president that we've had, certainly in my lifetime. And there's just a lot of media inertia and psychological resistance to actually hear what the guy's saying.
I guess we're gonna have to agree to disagree on that one, because I think he is. I think he's a horrible president. I think his policies are just so right wing. He listens to the last person in the room. I can't imagine anybody else being so out of control like he is on any decision he makes. I mean, yeah, he says a lot of things. Like he says he wanted stuff for DACA. He said he wanted health care for everybody, but everything that comes out is always filtered through the donors, filtered through the Republican Party, and always comes out, forgive me for saying, an ass end of, whatever else what he wanted.
To your point, I think Trump has been ineffective at actually getting done what he says. Mm-hmm. He ends up signing bills that the Republican Congress and Senate bring to him. Mm-hmm. And I don't see a lot of his influence on those bills.
And see, that's my biggest problem, too, because we've talked a lot about this on the show of how, like, the Republicans for years wanted just a guy that they could put a bill in front of and he'd sign it, whatever they wanted, and that's what they got out of him.
Yeah, I think certainly I've not seen Trump do anything with teeth to get the Republican Party doing his agenda as opposed to him doing theirs.
Interesting. I wanted to get your just kind of your analysis on this. Your perspective on this. As a former teacher, I wanted to know what did you think of all the school shootings, and what do you think is a solution to those, or what do you think is a step in the right direction?
Absolutely.
What should we do and what shouldn't we do?
Great question. So for the viewers who I'm not sure if I've talked about it on the show before, but for the viewers who don't know, I've got 4 kids all in public elementary school. So certainly I want to keep them safe and others like them safe, both at school and at the movie theater and anywhere else that people go. And so that is very important to me, very close to my own personal life. By the same token, I have friends and family members who perhaps have served in the military, others who haven't, and they own guns, including the kinds of guns that they were trained on in the military. And some of them own those guns because it makes them feel better able to protect their family. Some of them own those guns because they enjoy hunting. Some of them own those guns because they want to go to the range. Some of them are just kind of collectors. They just like having, the same way somebody collects teapots or whatever else. They collect guns because they think they're cool.
I collect stamps.
Right. So the question that I've asked myself is, do I feel like my kids would be meaningfully safer if we took away the guns from my aunts and uncles? And the answer to me is not at all. I don't see how doing that would increase the safety of my children or anyone else's, except perhaps, so I don't have guns in my home because I think that does increase the danger to my kids. But for people who have decided to take on that risk for their own families, that's on them. So I don't think gun bans per se are the right solution, particularly given that we have literally millions of households in Arizona with guns, and statistically speaking, we will not have a school shooting here in Arizona this year or next. It will probably be a long time before we do, because they are horrible. When they happen, they make a lot of news, but they don't happen statistically that often. So the question is, what can we do to stop the ones that are happening in a way that doesn't disenfranchise millions of people who are law-abiding citizens? I think the most important thing that we can do is close the background loophole, right? It's crazy that I can walk into a Walmart, buy an AR, walk outside, hand it to a guy. Buy an AR, hand it to a guy. Buy it to an AR, hand it to a guy. And there's nothing that punishes me for that kind of behavior. Or law that says I shouldn't do that. So the most important thing we can do is stop that from happening, making sure that folks are legally responsible for keeping track of their guns and making sure that they're only transferred to other responsible folks and being held responsible if that chain of responsibility is broken.
Yeah, I don't think we should ban assault rifles necessarily either. I mean, we're not necessarily, well, I can't speak for these two, but, you know, my stance is, you know, I was saying on the last show, I mean, I understand being a collector, and I understand, you know, wanting to have an arsenal, but when you have an arsenal, you should have to register that with the government.
Sure.
I mean, I just think you should. I mean, when you have, and I'm being conservative here, saying if you have 10 guns per household, say you have 3 homes, you have 10 guns per, you know, that house, that's fine. You should have it registered, though, with the government. Yeah. Also, too, they should have a means to limit ammunition. We really need a way to know where all the ammunition's going, and I really think, you know, a solution to that would be to outlaw making ammunition yourself.
That is some interesting stuff. You know, the outlawing the creation of ammunition is something this is the first time I've even hearing it. I've heard about other folks talk about limiting magazines. I've actually heard about folks who have served in the military and own high-capacity guns.
That's fine.
I'm willing to have their magazines limited.
I'm just saying, let's just limit the ammunition. You know, if you're a hunter, cool. You know, you can get the register to get the ammunition. You get, you know, you go through it one time through the system. Yeah. It's faster than every time you go. If you're a professional, you know, skeet shooter, whatever, it's faster every time you go through. Yeah. But if, like, let's say, you know, you're some random Joe Schmo, you own 30 rifles. And then you go into, you know, all these different stores and you just start racking up your ammunition. I think someone should say, hey, what do you need all this for? You've never had to buy all this ammunition before. Why are you buying it all now?
Yeah. I think, so, again, these aren't proposals that I'm, like, against. You know, I'm certainly open to discussing them. If I think about both sides of the issue, you know, for my brother's birthday one year, like, we took 20 people out into the desert and shot at stuff, right? And the ammunition buy for that birthday party, no doubt would have made somebody say, like, what are you doing this for?
Yeah.
And I would have been willing to answer that question at the time. So, again, I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just pointing out that I think there are legitimate reasons why a law-abiding person might, of a sudden, have
I get what you're saying. No, I get what you're saying. You know, there'd be ways to that, but, you know, of course, I'm not running things, but, you know, this is just my kind of what I think they should do, some steps, because, you know, we just keep hearing the debate, which is literally on one side, just no on gun legislation, just absolutely not. You know, you got all these marches, we got, you know, March for Our Lives, everything going on, which I want to hear your perspective on that in a minute here. That we have March for Our Lives, but then we just have one side that just says no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to stand on that side to say, you know, we're against one thing, no gun legislation.
Yeah.
But, you know, we have to do something, though, because if you look at the other country that had just as much guns as us, which was, I think, Yemen, and they have, you know, just as much guns per capita per person, their murder rate is skyrocketing, too. They have just as bad a murder rate as we do here in America, and, like, that's the only other country that has as much guns as we do.
Yeah.
We own half the world's guns. It's crazy. I mean, I just think we just have to get to the point of where there needs to be something done to not allow someone to just massacre people. Because you know how easy, I don't know if you knew about the Parkland shooter, how he did it. He just pulled the fire alarm, all the kids came out, and he shot them. That easy.
Yeah. I follow that. I think there's a few different things that are going on. You know, fundamentally, again, I'm happy to protect our kids. It is a passion of mine. I think like it should be of any politicians. The question is, what protections are meaningful, and how many people ought we to disenfranchise in order to
no, I get that,
put them in place, right? So I think in my case, like you mentioned some things that I'm not sure are factual. Because we have so many guns here, we do have a higher gun crime rate. But I'm not sure that we actually have higher murder rates or crime rates.
Oh, sorry, yeah, no, we do it, yeah, no, you're correct on that one,
so,
my bad.
And for that reason, there's a part of me that says, if we don't solve our actual problem, then taking away guns is just.
I don't want to take away guns. I'm not for taking away guns.
I know you're arguing that, but there are people who are. And
Yeah.
say like, if you take away guns, less people die with guns. Like, I have to follow you. Yes, that's true, but will less people die? There's not a whole lot of evidence for that necessarily.
Right. And going on with this.
Real quick.
Steve, I did actually pull that up. U.S. actually does have the most. It's 88 point guns for every 100 residents. With Yemen, it's 54.8 guns for every 100 residents.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to say we have. I was talking about.
No, he was just correct. He was just talking about the Yemen
I
part.
believe that. Yes.
We have the most guns.
Yeah.
Most residents have the most guns out of every other country.
I believe that. No doubt, I understand that,
Mm.
and it's true. And corresponding to that, we have a high guns being involved in crime.
Mm.
It's high, but crime being higher than other places, it doesn't follow from that. Right?
Yeah.
And that's all I was saying is that other places have gotten rid of guns and therefore gun crime, but not crime.
Yeah, I get what you mean. No, I get what you mean.
I get what you mean on that.
But I also hear the argument too, and this is what I would push back on, is like somebody would say like, oh, well in England, they got rid of guns, but stabbings have gone up.
Yeah.
Right.
No one's gonna stab 54 people.
Right.
And I think I can't remember who said it. I think it was Chris Rock. If you let someone get stabbed 54 people and you just sit there and watch, you deserve to get stabbed.
Yeah, there have been. It's not a laughing matter either. There have been school stabbings that have happened, but obviously not significantly more than school shootings.
Sure.
And this leads into the topic of today is the March for Your Life that's going on in D.C. where I don't even know, countless students and activists all over the world have come together to kind of stop the gun violence. And like I said, it goes back to the children being so raw right now with their emotions and their feelings are, at a level 10. It's so hard to kind of bring them to a conventional truth on what guns are and their safety. Because they just passed a law right now in Parkland where the children have to wear backpacks that are visible.
Oh, right. I remember seeing that.
So now, they're clear backpacks, but that's just for Parkland. What about other, places that are low poverty areas? You know what I mean? That suffer the same fates as them, but they don't get as much media coverage, or they don't get any funding or anything. They just, it just happens and it dies out. There's no say so. So those kids as well see it as no hope, and their only solution to them is just outlaw every gun. We don't want the guns.
Right.
That's their thing.
And we're not for that on this show. No.
We're not for that. And like you said, you just stated your point on that, but. Just to reassure that you were saying that for these children to make them safe is that it's not necessarily is what I'm getting from what you're taking, not the guns, but it's the mental health that these children need to have. So my thing and take is they need to have more counseling and strongly have that as a responsibility on the school's retrospect to counsel these children the best that they can, and if there's any type of signs, because again, how many signs did this Parkland kid have? I mean,
right.
People were saying he's been wanting to shoot up a school for months now, like on comment.
And the FBI did not look into him at all.
It's crazy how he was. They reported over him 20 times to the deputy, and they did nothing. So. For that, I just want one final clarification, if you can, for those students, because times are so rough right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so if a student were here in the room with us and was very passionate about these reforms, again, first off, I'd say I think reforms are necessary. So what I'm not saying is let's deal, okay?
Yeah, no, I get it.
It ain't that bad, right? So I would say we both see a need for change. I think the easiest thing to agree on is that we need to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and people who have shown a predisposition to criminal activity. So that's the first thing that we'd say. But beyond that, I would hope that the student would be willing to listen. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the phrase security theater or so what we don't want to do is not solve our problems, but create rules that make it look like we're trying to solve our problems. I think, what I think the best thing about true conservatism is that it says we're not going to fake try and solve our problem. Like, there are things about humanity that are real and raw, and we have to accept those things as they are and make meaningful changes to them, as opposed to fake legislation that doesn't actually affect things. Now, again, I know people who label themselves conservative these days do lots of crazy things that
wacky
are
things,
ineffective, and whatever else. But the best part of conservative ideology is, says people have to make themselves better, right? Like, you can't just mandate that no one's going to do bad things. You can't pass enough laws to stop bad things from happening. Fundamentally, we've got to help each other. We got to form friendships. We got to have civic groups. We got to have people who are interconnected. This mental health thing is all about being interconnected, reaching out, lifting people up, making them understand that it's not viable.
Don't you think one of the fundamental problems of that is some of the conservative legislation that has passed? Because one of the things that happened was, they rolled back legislation that allowed mentally ill people to get a hold of guns easier. And this is, probably because it was Obama-era legislation put in place that, everyone's got to get rid of all that. But, I think that's another fundamental problem. And, we also have the NRA that funds a lot of politicians, too. I just think that's another problem, though, when it comes to legislation, is, we can talk about getting legislation passed, but it's really, really hard to even get it in the process because, like I said, there's this wall that just says no.
No, I'm totally with you there. And in fact, for you guys and for listeners, I'll be releasing an exciting video in the next few days, another high-production video that takes shots at fake conservatives, because I am tired of that label being applied to people who are for big government, who show fiscal irresponsibility, who do all right. So, Doug Ducey, when he talks like he's a conservative, when he took over the state, our state debt was $9 billion. Now it's $16 billion. Like, that is absolutely divorced from conservative. Conservatism doesn't mean lower taxes and spend.
Exactly.
There's nothing conservative about that. Doug Ducey passed this opioid bill, which, again, it's security theater. It's care about life theater. It doesn't really address the problems that the opioid epidemic stands from. And I'm tired of people saying, blaming conservative ideology for political games that many people who are using that conservative label are playing.
Real quick, okay, let's move on a little bit. Well, real quick, I want to touch. I want to get into the Republican Party a little more here, but I want to know. This is a question I was thinking about when we were talking about this. What do you think about all the criticism the students have about people saying, these students should be in school, they shouldn't be out there protesting, they don't know what they're protesting for? I mean, have you heard that argument on?
I have heard that argument. So I'll begin by saying I don't think the students are dumb, and I don't think that their issue is unimportant. And I think a lot of people who express those sorts of things that are fundamentally saying that. Right? Certainly, I have noticed that right now, and again, we can blame it on whoever, but Republicans did it to Obama. Now Democrats are doing it to Trump. It's back and forth. It's really no different, and that is an absolute lack of respect for folks who are in authority, and a lack of basic understanding about how you get people to do something, right? Like, if I wanted you, like, suppose I didn't like the way you were hosting this show, for me to go like, Rob sucks, right? That's not how you win friends and influence people. And the whole idea that the way to get things done is to yell and scream and curse and whatever else, I actually don't think it's bearing a lot of fruit. Certainly, we don't look outside and be like, look how effective the Democrats have been since Trump took office, right? They're getting stuff done.
I guess the reviews are in, though, guys.
So that being said, I think it's interesting that kids are getting more involved, and I hope it turns into higher voter turnout and whatever else. But I also think people are going to get burned out when they see that just shouting and walking in the streets doesn't actually get anything done. So we'll see how that goes.
I wanna get your take on this, and I know I know it's gonna be kind of treading the waters a little bit here, blood in the water and everything, especially being in a red state. I want to get your take on this though, and this is something we talk a lot about this show. And you were talking about you're doing a video about hitting fake conservatives.
Yeah.
Have you heard about the Arthur Jones that just won in Illinois?
I'm not sure if I have. So
well, 20,000 Republican voters voted for this guy, and he's a Nazi.
Yes, I have heard.
A literal Nazi, and we're kind of seeing this all across the country. We did a show a while ago. That's one of our most popular episodes, called The Unhinged Party, which we talk about Arthur Jones, some of these other conservatives that are just out of their minds. I can't. Paul Neiman, the guy running for Paul Ryan's seat, I think his name, making a list of Jewish Twitter users. And he's a member of the alt-right. Yeah. But some people would say this is the Republican Party, though, and this is just kind of I actually have said it too, and you can go ahead and push back. I think this is a mutation of what's going on right now. I mean, I think moderate Republicans are going down, and this new mutation is this new kind of
mascot Republican,
far-right, alt-right conservatism, which alternative facts rule. Yeah. We got to build a wall because some reason it will keep me safe, even though they can just climb over it, dig over it, go around, or throw the drugs just clean over the wall. But we need that wall because it'll make me feel safe.
Right.
And there was a recent study done in which they said that fear actually shows how conservative you would be. They actually did this for a long time, where they took children and scared them. The more they were scared as they were little, the more conservative they grew up to be.
Yeah.
So they're saying that just conservatism is based on fear. I want to know what do you think of this whole? Is there a mutation in the party? Do you think this is the Republican Party, or do you think this is just a fraction of it?
Well, I'd say I've got a variety of thoughts around that. The first thing that I'll say is that you mentioned these studies that were done. When you look into folks, there's a nice thing that I frequently see tweeted by folks on the left side of the spectrum, and that's the idea that no one's born a racist. Mm. Well, it actually turns out that everyone is born a racist. And when you discount that fact, then you take the humanity of some of the other people and you demonize them for groupishness that is built into the human genome and our social whatever. So I think I think in many cases we need to overcome that. But we don't overcome that by asking as though people have made a choice to opt into that, as opposed they haven't made the choice to opt out of that. And I think also, when you look at Martin Luther King, for example, he was incredibly effective, and he was marching for, black lives, right? But the way he phrased it was about, the white man's my brother, all lives are equal, we want equality, all these
That's not around anymore,
Right.
Such a tribalistic kind of nature. Now there's and I know Steve would make this point, there's Black Lives Matter.
Right.
And then there's Blue Lives Matter.
Right.
And there's White Lives Matter.
Right. And Nazi Lives Matter.
All those sorts of things. And fundamentally, one thing I know, when I first looked into Black Lives Matter, the first thing I realized is that wasn't black people trying to talk to me. That was black people talking to other black people. Mm. And I think that that's great. But I also think that by making that choice, they open themselves up. Language choice is something that progressives and liberals are horrible at. What's more important,
Absolutely.
A life or a choice? What's more important, all lives or black lives? Mm. Like on every single issue, they choose language that puts them on the losing side of the argument. If you started with all lives matter, with that notion, then there would have been no counter argument, right? Like you couldn't have Trump, you couldn't have gone with the higher argument. But instead, you've done the identity politics on the whole is a losing battle. Like, what are you going to do for veterans? Well, I'll do this. Well, what are you going to do for transgender veterans? Well, what are you going to do for transgender veterans who are opioid addicted? Like, I don't know. Are they people? I'm going to stand up for people who are being wrong.
I absolutely agree with that. Because one of the arguments I like to make, I take race clean out of it when I talk about the shootings, because I say, regardless of race, the police are killing unarmed people at a very disproportionate rate.
Yeah.
Now, you can either agree with that or not. Take race completely out of it.
Right.
So there is either a fundamental problem with the police or there's something else going on.
And to that point, I sympathize with the reality of what Black Lives Matter is talking about, right? People are getting scared because of their inbuilt biases that are genetic.
Yes.
People are getting in situations where they get scared and they make the wrong decisions. And I've talked to a few friends who are police officers, and I have found out that the way they are trained, to me, is crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what, when they're told to fight, my agency actually represents the Phoenix Police Department, and we set up a spot for the Police Training Academy, and what the news decided to cover was this, like, virtual reality, like a 7-sided room with screens on each side, and it was, like, people coming out, and, like, you had to decide whether or not to shoot them. And, like, in that thing on a morning show, right, Good Morning Arizona, that cop laid out like 7 people, and they're all just raising their hands, right? So, and you're told that, like, if somebody moves their hands towards their hips, shoot. So I understand that cops are they're scared, and they're genetically wired to be scared in those situations, and B, they're trained not to give people the benefit of the doubt, but to preserve their own life if they're having.
Which I think is, I think that's wrong.
I think
personally.
I gotta disagree on that because I disagree on a lot of things.
Yeah.
But it would take like forever, right?
Yeah.
But on that perspective, yes, I do believe police officers are scared.
Yeah.
That's number one, and they've always been scared.
Yeah.
They've always been it. You can trace back the history yourself, do your research, you'll see it. But when you're talking about the Black Lives Matter and the wrong choice of words, it's such a weird topic because I agree and I disagree, obviously, right? When you give it the name Black Lives Matter, they're doing that not to kind of appease just the black people, but they're doing that to, make it known that it's not supposed to be comfortable. You know what I mean? Being an activist, you're not supposed to make other people comfortable. You're supposed to make them uncomfortable. That's the whole thing about making change. Martin Luther King said the things he said to make white people and other people of races uncomfortable so they can get out of their shell to make a change. So I agree and I disagree on that fact, but when I go back to the police, them being scared and, like you said, shooting at somebody before they're even seeing a weapon of any choice to protect themselves, I do believe is wrong. Just on the fact that I could be reaching for my license and registration.
Because you're supposed to be, self-serving. You're supposed to,
protect and serve.
Protect and serve. You're not supposed to put yourself first.
Even though you're serving.
I do agree with that notionally, but I'll also say, A, we aren't compensating police officers that way.
Yeah.
And B, we aren't training them that way. And so
I'm glad you brought that up because we've discussed on the show. We do think it's a matter of training.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you know in the military, they're trained to raise your guns when you're gonna fire.
Yeah.
Only.
Yeah. So we absolutely agree on that point, and I'll agree. There are provocateurs, and being a provocateur can be a useful form of activism. But when it comes to swaying the majority of public opinion, ideally you want to take the highest road, and linguistically, the idea that all lives matter is a more universal. It trumps the other one. And anybody who's going, like, I myself have said, I understand why all lives matter doesn't work for folks. All lives won't matter until Black Lives Matter or whatever else. But again, I understand that choices matter and women's health matter or whatever else. But when you phrase it as pro-life versus pro-choice, like, lives are more important than choices in general. If you just said what's more important, you'd say when somebody asks me if I have no interest in changing existing abortion law. When somebody asks me if I'm pro-life, I'll say yes every time. And if somebody asks me if I'm pro-choice, I'll also say yes. Like, I'm not going. I know that what they are asking is a different question, but I'm asking the literal word choice they brought to me. I'm shooting that right back at them, and I'll elaborate on that. I'm not trying to deceive people. I'm just understanding words matter.
Well, I want to keep on going with this. I'm going to bring up the latest police shooting that just happened last Sunday. Police go into this suspect's grandparents' backyard, and they mistake a cell phone for a gun.
It was a crowbar.
Was it a crowbar?
It was a crowbar, I believe it was.
I heard phone. No, it could be a crowbar.
You know, I think I'm thinking of another case.
It's
Continue,
another
please.
case.
Yeah, my bad. I'm sorry. Continue, please.
This one happened in Sacramento last Sunday.
Yeah.
And
I'm wrong.
the cops yell out gun, 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 and they shoot the guy 20 times.
Right.
I mean, and I'm going to agree with Steve. Cops are scared and they mistake things for a weapon, like a crowbar or a gun. But this guy just had his cell phone in his hand, and like they should have said drop the weapon. They had him covered.
Well, I've even seen worse cases. There was one here where they actually made the guy crawl on his hands and knees and then crawl towards them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he was like, crawl, and as soon as and then they shot him.
Yeah, because it was still a threat, even if you're on the ground.
Which, answers why didn't they just go over there and arrest him if he's on his knees, hands and
so
knees?
after seeing that video, like, it literally made me cry, and I feel bad because that part, I've cried at other ones. That one, it made me ask, like, what can you do to not get shot?
Exactly.
I thought, like, that guy followed those directions, like, so to the T. Being, he was drunk in his own hotel room and whatever else, but he followed directions and got laid out. And, the other one, I of course can't remember his name at the moment, but, the traffic stop, his daughter's in the back.
Oh, yeah.
The guy got a gun.
He did everything he was supposed to do.
Yeah. So fundamentally, I'll say two things. I don't think this recent one is going to be one to build a big movement around, because the dude was committing a crime. And I just don't think you're going to get everybody to get passionate about the fact that guy got shot. I agree it was an excessive use of force, but it was a dude who had demonstrated dangerousness and lack of respect for the law. I think, this other one where the guy was in his hotel room minding his own business, comes out on his hands and knees and gets shot, that would get people excited. Guy sitting in his car, following directions, his daughter's in the back, his wife's next to him, he says, I've got a gun over there, I promise you I'm not going to reach for it or anything else. And, goes to take off his seatbelt as instructor or whatever it was and gets shot. Like, those sorts of things you can build a movement around. Anything where there's been a crime committed beforehand, of any sort, jaywalking maybe not, but a property crime or a violent crime committed beforehand, it won't serve to move this movement forward.
So are you saying, I want to get this clarification from my listeners, are you saying if you were governor, or elected governor today, you would start to try and change police training?
Absolutely. And I would work to fund the, work with cities to fund police officers at a level where you could say to people, you can't be wrong. If you're going to take this job and you're going to shoot at people, you have to be right. And you've got to, I understand, like, the reality, again, my first degree is in psychology. I understand that you've got lag time. Like, by the time you notice a gun, that person's got a fraction of a second head start on you, right? You have to allow that to happen. It has to materialize. It has to be real. You can't use hand to move towards hip as evidence that they might be going for a gun. It can't be that way. And there are other reforms that could be made. Unfortunately, police reform is a challenge because the jurisdictions are so small, right? And it's a little bit hard to overlay that with everything.
Some precincts aren't funded as much as others are.
Well, they just got, like a few days after Parkland, Phoenix Elementary School District lost. They only had like 4 resource officers for 13 schools or whatever it was to begin with, and they lost all of those because the federal grant ran out that was funding resource officers, right? So, at least in Phoenix, things are moving in the wrong direction as it relates to funding police officers and being present in a constructive way in the community and whatever else. I think we can change that.
So let's change up a little bit with some fun stuff here. So I want to get your perspective on this. So Stormy Daniels. Excuse me. What do you think of this whole situation? You think it's true? Think it's not? Do you think it's? I mean, as a man that is full transparent as yourself, none's gonna come up like this for you, which is something I would say to voters, like, just so you know, I ain't gonna have no Stormy Daniels come out of my closet.
Right.
Just so you know.
Right. Or, Steve Montenegro or
Exactly.
whatever else, right?
Right.
And I don't even think what Steve Montenegro did is
Montenegro.
that big of a deal, except that he's posing as a preacher and whatever else, somebody who wouldn't do those sorts of things, right? It's the hypocrisy that got people. I don't think it was the acts themselves. If I were a betting man and there was some way to have a crystal ball and know the truth, I would certainly bet that the Stormy Daniels stuff is real. I have a hard time believing that it's not real, given what we know. I also haven't paid a lot of attention to it.
Yeah, we haven't really either. We got bigger fish to fry. Yeah, we glance over. Yeah, we just think it's funny.
Yeah,
we think the hypocrisy of it is funny. It's like how Fox News had this story in hand a while ago, and they're like, "Oh God, this smearing against Donald Trump is horrible."
Yeah, and fundamentally what I think is the character of Donald Trump as it relates to sexuality and promiscuity while married was well documented before the election. If voters cared, it would have mattered then. It's a non-issue. And again, this is the thing that I think is not, it doesn't serve anyone to prosecute this, right? Or to follow it, to make a thing of it, right? Like, we've got other things to do.
However, if it was Bill Clinton,
I totally did. When people make the point of if it were Obama who was on his third wife with his fifth kid.
God, that Obama in his tan suit. A tan suit.
So I do understand the hypocrisy, but it's the hypocrisy goes both ways, right? Like the same people who said you won't, it's not right to criticize Obama because of his color, or the people who hate Obama only hate him because of his color, are the same people who are calling Trump a Cheeto and an Oompa Loompa and everything else, right? Like they attack him on his color. They attack him on the way his hair blows in the wind, right? That was a huge media story, and it was like a non-thing.
I want to get your perspective on this, because that's something we actually talk about a lot in this show, is, are we winning as Democrats, really? Because I like to make the argument, and I said this to the guy from Pod Saves America, and he still hasn't answered me back on Twitter, and I want to know why. I said, because he was talking about the Lamb who just won, the moderate Democrat, and what he ran off of. And, I was like, you missed the point when it comes to progressives and Democrats. We don't want we don't want people that take, donor money. Don't just say this guy's for this stuff. We got to see how he votes, first of all. But the problem is we don't want money in politics, and that's the biggest fundamental problem that we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, so there's a couple of different things going on there. First off, I'll say that at least here in Arizona, the blue wave is probably highly overrated.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't get to finish my thought. But what I was trying to say though is that we elect people like Lamb, but are we really getting any solutions? Like, it's kind of like what I was talking about with Steve Farley. He's just a cookie cutter of the Democratic Party. There is no change. There's no real policy put in place. It's just business as usual.
Sure.
And you get that from all the anti-Trump hysteria. No one's looking into the policy. No one knows what this guy cares about with marijuana. No one knows what he really believes in. Is he really pro-life or, pro-choice? What is he?
Yeah.
Because you had Doug Jones recently get in there, and he votes with Trump on a lot of issues.
And fundamentally, I'm going to say a few different things. So, the first thing, talking about Doug Jones, is my belief is that Doug Jones is probably representing his constituents, which he should do.
I'll give you that there.
So, I'm not, here in Arizona, my problem is that people from conservative districts aren't representing their conservative voters. Like, I've talked to a bajillion Republicans, right? And Republican voters want a strong public education system. There are very few Republican voters who are saying, I love the idea of dismantling public education and making it all private/charter-based.
Oh, God.
So that's not a Republican voter value, but that is something that Republican legislatures line up behind.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of stuff goes on all of the time. In the last legislative cycle, they keep on trying to undermine the power of people as it relates to initiative, referendum, and recall. Like, there's nobody out there who's saying, like, it's so easy to get an initiative on the ballot. Please, legislature, make it harder. Right? Or no voters, right? Maybe the Arizona Chamber of Commerce is doing that, but that ain't regular voters. So with that being said, I think folks representing their constituents is a beautiful thing that should happen, even when it may not look like the way party lines would be diced up.
I agree with that in a sense, but I'm talking about if he runs on marijuana, like we're going to legalize marijuana, and then he votes for something like something else on anti-marijuana, kind of like Kristen Sinema, but we're not going to get too far into that, which is interesting. But before we wrap things up, I have two more questions for you. I want to know what you think of the state of Arizona politics are right now. Like, who's in trouble on the Republican side? Who do you think has a good chance to win on the Democrat side?
Those are great questions. I spend a lot of time with Deidre.
She's awesome. Yeah, she's amazing. Good. We've endorsed her on this show. She's awesome.
So I don't think I don't think I'll be voting in the Democratic primary. We'll see how that goes. I haven't made a decision on which primary I'll vote yet in August. But certainly I think Sinema is a politically stronger. Certainly there's a lot of resources and whatnot. So I'll be interested to see how that race plays out. I think the Democratic nominee for Senate will probably be the candidate. That person will have a good chance of actually winning that race.
I don't know. Against Arpaio, because Arpaio is the front runner right now.
Yeah. He is.
I don't think Arpaio. So I think the most exciting thing that could happen would be for Arpaio to win that race. Actually,
I'm worried on that one.
I would choose for the Democrat.
I wouldn't put anything past him.
I think they're both terrible. Kelly Ward and Arpaio. Either one of them would just be a terrible. But I actually wouldn't mind Kelly Ward because I'm sorry, she loses every time.
Well, so I think there's a lot of things going on there, but if the Arpaio thing was strong, Montenegro probably would have won. I understand he had a little bit of a blow.
That is a good point.
But I think it's weaker than Republicans are saying, and I don't talk about the Senate race a lot. All the time I have people asking me, like, do you support Trump's agenda and whatever else? But
do you support MAGA Man?
Right. People aren't asking me, like, do you support Arpaio, or what do you think of Arpaio? And, we voted, even here in Maricopa, we voted him out, right?
We voted him out, yeah.
Lost.
We have Penzone for a reason.
Right. So I would love it if he beat Kelly Ward. I'm not incredibly confident he will, but we'll see. I think that's strong. Other Dems who are strong, the Democratic I think David Shapira is. I like Kathy Hoffman too. Again, we've spent time together. I think she's a great candidate, and her tenacity and energy is amazing. I think David Shapira's got a lot more momentum, and I think he's a candidate who can do what David Garcia couldn't do.
Interesting.
And maybe, beat what's-her-face, Diane Douglas. Those are candidates that I think are strong. I don't think January Contreras will win. Bill Pierce for mine inspector. It's not a race most people are very excited about.
Yeah.
We'll see how that happens. The Corporation Commission candidates, I don't have a lot of confidence that that'll be different. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some of Bill Mundell actually came close to winning last election. He'll be on again. So
you think we're going to get that blue wave here, though?
Fundamentally, I don't. And here's the reason why. Blue wave, I suppose what's like a wave, like if I drop a pebble in an aquarium, like that's a wave, right?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was talking about.
So I think we might get that kind of a wave. I think we might win
couple seats,
a seat or two in each of the houses. But I don't think we'll go beyond that. And the reason, people who look around at other elections.
But we're going to get governor, right?
We're going to get governor. That'll be the purple wave.
Right.
The seats, Pennsylvania 18th, Democrats have actually had a 5,000 registrant lead for the now, and that's a district that they couldn't win with a voter registration lead for almost the last 20 years. Like, that is crazy to me. And it ain't no big reason to celebrate that you finally won a district that was yours. And when you look at, Doug Jones or whatever, Doug Jones beat by a small percentage a pedophile, right?
Right.
Like
not a big
that's
win.
Not a big win. And I got no love for Doug Ducey, but he's not a pedophile. He's no Roy Moore. He's no Saccone or whatever that dude's name is. So here, like, you aren't going to win. If I dropped out of the race, it would be Doug Ducey again for 4 years, guaranteed. David Garcia can't do it.
I actually agree with you. I actually don't think Steve Farley or David Garcia can do it. I don't think so. I think they're just too, like I keep saying, they're too cookie cutter.
Yeah.
There's no dynamic to them. I think there's nothing different, But before we head on, I want to know what would you tell the voters and my listeners right now? What makes you different from David Garcia, Steve Farley? I mean, why should they look at you right now?
Yeah. None of them are talking about the biggest issues that really matter. Fundamentally, you're going to have 3 choices come November. One choice is no change, literally, right? You can get the same thing you've gotten. Higher debts, not solving big problems, crappier education. That's Doug Ducey. David Garcia or Steve Farley, it's going to be the same stuff by a different name. They are not change. The political system is not about actually changing things, as we've seen. Right now, the political system is about how much money can we raise for our campaigns. That's going to keep our campaign managers and field directors fed and whatever else. Media companies are going to love it. But it's not about getting stuff done. And the third vote is for real change, actual change. And I am the only candidate that is offering anything different than what Arizona has seen for the last several decades. And I'm offering to represent Arizona, all of Arizona. David Garcia, he represents a third of Arizona, maybe some of the Democrats. Doug Ducey, maybe a third of Arizona, some of the Republicans. I'm here to represent the vast majority of Arizonans, and that is something that no other candidate is talking about. They're only talking to the far left and far right.
They're not busting out that acoustic, right? Telling about how much they love Arizona.
Right.
Giving Arizona a love letter. I mean, come on, man. Come on. I love it. Well, Noah, as always, we love having you on the show. It's great to have you again. Always fun, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Noah Dyer, everybody.
Yeah.
Go ahead and, what's your campaign at, Noah?
NoahDyer.com. And for all the listeners out there, the most important thing you can do for me is sign my petition. It's criminal. If you haven't known, last plug here. If I were a Republican or Democrat, I need 5,000 signatures to get on the ballot. As an independent, they make me get 35,000 signatures to get on the ballot. I've got enough signatures already that if I was a Republican or a Democrat, I'd be on the ballot 3 times over. I'll be the first independent candidate to have even gotten on the ballot since 2002, and before that in 1986. But I can't do it without folks signing my petition. So if you are hearing this, you can go to signfornoah.com or noahdyer.com/sign, whichever is easier for you to remember. And please tell all of your friends, because we've got tens of thousands of signatures, and we need tens of thousands more. It's crazy.
All right, thank you, Noah. This has been the Minutemen Podcast. I'm your host, Rob, with the Dark Frenchman, Steve.
Yes.
And behind the mic, Squid.
We'll see you guys later.
And Noah Dyer.
Thank you, guys.
And have a great night, everybody.